The Reaktor 5 player is something that you really need to take a look at, but I would really recommend that you try and get your head around our entire course before you delve too deeply into it. Otherwise, you're just going to drive yourself nuts. If we open it up and take a look, we'll be able to see what we've got inside it. Essentially, Reaktor is a synth, or maybe just any audio programming environment that if you really know what you're doing, you can make your own synths out of. The Reaktor player, which we've got here, is a free download from NI that allows you to load up free, or paid for if you like, Reaktor instruments. And there are 5 free instruments that come in the Reaktor Elements section that are absolutely fantastic, and they range from the fairly simple to the unbelievably complicated and wacky. Here we've got a drum synth, and it's one of the only drum synths that we could find, in fact pretty much the only one, that's completely free to use. In fact, if we play now, you'll see that it's loaded up with a massive amount of different presets, and those presets not only have different sounds, but they have different patterns built in, and you can change any of these sounds. And what's more, you can play the sounds yourself by coming down here and clicking on the EXT, which is for external control, and you'll see here that the MIDI notes are attached here, and you can even learn them, but I can play the different notes with the keyboard. This means that when you go to, say for instance, Unit 1, you'll be able to just make 6 different synthesized drum sounds and give yourself basically an entire library of sounds to play with. It's well worth finishing off everything else that we've looked at though, just as everything else in the Reaktor library, because when you've got your head around all the terms that we come across during the course of the course, you'll recognise things and it'll make a lot more sense. Until then, you'll find yourself flailing around and not understanding what you're doing. Next up, we need to look at metaphysical function, and this is really crazy. This is literally just a drone synth that doesn't require any action from you, and it will just make these otherworldly sounds. And there are huge amounts of presets, as well as a randomize button that can just create an infinite amount of droning sounds. And you can record these, you can maybe modulate the mute that's over here with automation, so you can turn it on and off in specific places and just really get an infinite amount of sounds, but it's not something that you'll use every day. Oki Computer is a nice little synth that if you want to get some perhaps different sounds from what you can get out of the TAL series, you can look at some patches in here, and there are some fantastic patches in here, and of course you can also change them yourself. And you can see that we've got filter over here with our different filters. We've got what we can see is our oscillator, and it's not quite an oscillator that we've seen in our TAL parts, but what we're doing essentially is really creating our own weird oscillator as we go. Same with our envelopes and a wavetable that we can use to synchronize things to various, if we look at, see how quickly that's going, and then we can variation that, change the length of it, and we can open different wavetables, we can move it. It's really something that once you get past synthesizer basics, as we do in our course, you'll be able to play with, and you can see everything from chorus and bit mode crunching and sample rate to a modulation matrix. You'll really get a lot out of Oki Computer if you already understand synths. Similarly, we've got Photon, which is just a really big, really nice sounding polyphonic synth that looks a lot more complicated than it is, but we've got our oscillators here. We've got our waveforms that we can choose for our oscillators. We've got the oscillator's pitch. We come over to here and we've got filters, and we can choose how we want to route the filters. We can remember our parallel and serial modes from when we look at how we route effects. And we've got our multi-filters here. We've got shapers, which more or less akin to distortion effects, EQs and modulations. So we can go quite deep with this as well, and if you feel yourself feeling adventurous after understanding what we're doing in our synth tutorial part of the course, this is a nice place to come. Finally, Reaktor 5 Player has got what's called Steam Pipe 2 in it, and Steam Pipe is a physical modelling synth, and what it does is literally looks at the maths behind what happens when you blow down a pipe and tries to turn that into something that it can generate on the fly. The reason that we're not going to go into it is because there's quite a specific sound to steam pipe, and it's going to be something that is probably easy for you to play around with. We'd still suggest that you finish the rest of the course before you play around too much, but you'll see that we've got things like our envelopes, we've got our cutoff and resonance for our filters and generators, and then we've got delays, feedback, and these are all terms and all things that you'll recognise as we go through the course. Play around with Steam Pipe and see what crazy sounds you can get out of it. That's generally the best thing I can suggest for all of Reaktor 5 Player. You'll get the most out of it by understanding rather than just pressing buttons, but there is going to be a certain amount of pressing buttons involved, especially with things like metaphysical function, to give you cool sounds. So this is one to bookmark and come back to when you come